Qashqai for Russia, as well as for Europe. They are assembled not in Japan, but in English Sunderland, so do not be surprised at the crooked joining of body panels. The paintwork is also not exemplary. The body resists corrosion well, but even small pebbles leave paint chips, and the varnish rubs off and becomes cloudy very quickly. The peeling chrome emblem on the fan grille does not paint the appearance either. For pre-styling versions older than 2009, the handle for opening the fifth door becomes loose over time. In order to get to its fasteners, you will have to remove the inner lining. And don't forget to look closely at restyled cars from behind. Misted headlights are a common occurrence, and they obviously saved money on their sealing. The manual transmission knob and interior door handles are quickly going bald. After 5 or 6 years, the peeled coating can also please the visor of the instrument panel. And in the summer, in no case do not leave Qashqai with the plastic steering wheel under the scorching sun. The rim material can easily melt and leak. Accumulating condensate spoils the upholstery of the ceiling in the area of sun visors and A-pillars, especially in the presence of a huge panoramic sunroof. On the front doors, power windows begin to stick with age. Too much dirt gets into the guides. It's not worth pulling with cleaning. You risk burning the electric window lifter motor. And when inspecting the car, be sure to turn up the volume of the music. After a few years, the interior upholstery of the doors begins to resonate and rattle. If the audio system does not want to respond to the control buttons on the steering wheel, you will have to replace the steering column switch block. An unsuccessfully laid wiring harness breaks over time, which can also cause turn signals to fail. One of the problems is not the most effective door seals and an extremely unsuccessful heater. Warm air cannot be seen until the engine is fully warmed up, which can be expected forever on the highway in frost. Many owners drive with the grandfather's cardboard box in front of the radiator because of this. And the air temperature sensor in the cabin, attached in an unfortunate place under the steering column, likes to lie. After restyling in 2009, the stove became more efficient. The location of the sensors and the climate control algorithm changed. But unnecessary, frosty freshness can still be added either by a failed fan relay, because of which the latter starts to thresh constantly, or by a burned-out heater motor resistor. Then there will be no air pressure at all. The motor itself often catches branches, leaves, and other gifts of nature. Without periodic cleaning, it will not last long, and for fresh cars it often changed under warranty. Engines. Gasoline engines, a 2-liter MR20DE, 72% of cars on the market, and a 1.6-liter HR16DE, 22% of cars, are similar in design, all aluminum, with a timing chain and a phase change system at the inlet. Do not look for hydraulic bearings at the valves. Adjusting the valve clearances after 100,000 kilometers will have to be done the old-fashioned way, by selecting the height of the pushers. Both motors are quite reliable and are able to overcome 250 to 300,000 kilometers. But after 100,000 kilometers they can go on strike. They refuse to start. Due to an overly stretched timing chain, the camshaft position sensor will give an error. Floating idle speed and loss of power are witnesses of the neglect of flushing the throttle assembly every 30 to 50,000 kilometers. And with the 2-liter MR20D engine, you need to be extremely careful when replacing spark plugs. Due to the slightest tightening, a too thin wall of the spark plug well can burst, and the coolant will go into the combustion chamber, and the exhaust gases into the cooling system. Minor repairs will no longer help here. You will have to change the cylinder head. The engine mounts fly quickly. The rear one, without waiting even 100,000 kilometers, is rented out first. The upper ones rarely last longer than 120,000 kilometers, and then silent blocks of the subframe may be needed. Closer to old age, both gasoline units begin to suffer from incontinence of processed fluids. Cat marks the ground with oil. Surely it oozes along the junction of the pallet. The sealant replacing the usual gasket has dried up and needs to be updated. Is there a smell of gasoline in the cabin? In the area of /U200B/U200B rear seats? So, the plastic pipe of the fuel pump installed in the tank cracked, because of which Nissan carried out a recall campaign to replace the pumps. The pump itself, by the way, is equipped with a filter mesh designed for the entire service life. But if the motor starts to choke and work intermittently with the full tank, you will have to remove the pump from the tank and clean the filter. And if antifreeze leaves, check the penny sealing ring of the thermostat or thermostats. There are 2 of them in a 2-liter unit. If the thermostat is out of business, look for traces of antifreeze on the expansion tank. A tank leak at the junction is a signature sore of gasoline Qashqais. Diesel versions have a different, more reliable tank. But this, alas, is not much of what two turbo diesels have in common. A 1.5-liter K9K, 5% of cars, and a 2-liter M9 are 1% of cars. Both unanimously do not favor dubious gas stations. Dissatisfaction leads not only to the purchase of new nozzles, but also to the converter. From long idling and Cork city traffic, the particulate filter is clogged. And in order not to run into buying a new USR valve, flush the recirculation system every 40 to 50,000 kilometers. But for the 2-liter M9 or unit, the list of potential weaknesses is only supplemented by the return line of the fuel system. It happens that after a couple of years the plastic pipes burst and the fuel enters the exhaust manifold, which will tell the smell of fried diesel fuel in the cabin. The 1.5-liter K9K turbo diesel has an even less pleasant ambush with fuel lines. After 5 or 6 years, the unsuccessful material of their rubber seals can swell so much that it significantly blocks the cross-section of the tubes. Due to a lack of fuel, the diesel engine simply will not start. Less commonly, a fuel priming pump located in the fuel tank becomes the culprit for a poor start. The turbine of a 1.5 diesel engine rarely withstands more than 150,000 kilometers. But the saddest thing is that the motor itself may require serious repairs by this run. To the characteristic diesel rumble, the knock of connecting rod bearings is added. An obvious bobble came out with their wear resistance. By the way, the same trouble with the K9K engine threatens the owners of Renault cars. Many models have it, including the popular Duster. The 6-speed automatic Jatco JF613E, which is found exclusively in tandem with the 2-liter M9 or diesel engine, is extremely reliable if you do not forget to change the oil every 60,000 kilometers. The first repair may be needed much later than 250,000 kilometers. The 6-speed mechanics is even stronger. Change your clutch every 150,000 kilometers. But with the 5-speed gearbox, put on the HR16 gasoline engine, one can only dream of this. If the clutch has lived up to 100,000 kilometers, consider yourself lucky. It is often necessary to change it after only 40 to 50,000 kilometers. And after 150,000 kilometers, the box often has to be repaired to change worn-out synchronizers. And even more so, you need to keep your eyes open when buying gasoline Qashqais with the Jatco JF011E variator. The longevity of the variator is most tangibly affected by two things: the driving style and the timeliness of the oil change. The Nissan CVT Fluid NS2 branded transmission is designed strictly for 60,000 kilometers and is not cheap, and a new filter will cost another $90, but the savings will be much more expensive. Twitching when moving the selector lever to position D, noticeable delays at start, stupidity while driving, and freezing during acceleration can turn into an amount from $3,000 for repairs to $7,000 for a new unit. But even with careful handling, the age of the variator is not particularly long. An expensive pushing belt is on average 130 to 150,000 kilometers released. Please note that it is more expensive to tighten it with its replacement. A worn belt can pull up the surface of the tapered pulleys. If at one point the variator froze at 1-gear ratio, get ready to replace the stepper motor. There are cases of KOI, yes, for Ibupex or no smoldering copies of the variator selector refuses to shift gears. Well, if the selector lock solenoid is to blame, sometimes you have to change the entire selector. After a run of 100 to 120,000 kilometers, it may be necessary to replace the bearings of the drive and driven shafts, which will be indicated by a slight hum when driving. But the stuck valve of the oil pump, alas, does not give itself away until the breakage of the variator due to oil starvation. For prevention, it must be updated when replacing the belt. And do not forget that the cat is a purely asphalt inhabitant. Attempts of off-road exercises will instantly kill not only the variator, but also the electromagnetic clutch of the rear axle. And the clutch already has a hard time. It is not very reliably protected from sand and dust getting inside. Far from off-road and short-stroke rigid suspension, she pestered the first owners with a roar, shaking and quickly, after 20 to 40,000 kilometers, failing sack shock absorbers. The rear shock absorbers were especially upsetting because of the poorly designed lower mount. They also had to be changed because of the broken bushing that came with the shock absorber. And after 50 to 60,000 kilometers, under warranty, the front hubs with buzzing bearings often changed. When restyling, the suspension was shaken up, changing characteristics and curing most of the childhood diseases. Wheel bearings have doubled the resource. Shock absorbers rarely have to be changed before the ball bearings of the front suspension, which can withstand 80 to 100,000 kilometers. But even in the modernized suspension, the old fly in the ointment remain. The support bearings of the front struts, poorly protected from dirt, abrasively worn to a crunch after 50,000 kilometers. Steering and brakes. Alas, the signature creak when turning the steering wheel has not gone away either. Replacing the culprit, the steering shaft seal, does not help. It remains to regularly lubricate the squeaky rubber with silicone grease. In cold weather, cars younger than 2009 sometimes fail with electric power steering. Check if the previous owner missed the recall campaign with its free replacement. And in the brake system of cars of the first years of production, a jammed piston in the front caliper can add trouble. Total. In general, the well-being of older cats could be better, but the prices don't bite. Mitsubishi ASX comparable in reliability is slightly more expensive, on average by 10 to 20,000 rubles. For Kia Sportage or Hyundai Tucson, and later Hyundai 935, they are already asking for 50 to 60,000 rubles more. Even the related Renault Koleos cost 70,000 rubles more, not to mention the 100,000 surcharge for Volkswagen Tiguan or Ford Kuga. So a used Qashqai is worth buying, but restyled and inexpensive. The best choice is a 2-liter diesel engine with either mechanics or automatic. Is this hard to find? Then, petrol versions with manual transmission.